It was a Thursday morning in late September, 5 years to the month since my mother vanished from my life. And I was sitting in a leather booth at Morgan's Diner pretending the ache in my chest had finally gone numb. It was one of those perfect fall days where the air smells clean and the sunlight cuts through the windows at just the right angle, making everything look sharper than it really is. I was supposed to be celebrating. My name is Carl Harold, CEO of Harold Electric Solutions, which had just closed a $15 million contract, the kind of deal that separates the serious players from the guys still hustling for scraps. The biggest single contract Harold Electric Solutions had ever closed. 300 residential units, full electrical installation, 18 months of guaranteed work. With our annual revenue hitting $17 million last year, this deal alone would push us past $20 million by year-end. My business partner Dennis sat across from me scrolling through project specs on his tablet, talking about timelines and profit margins, and I was nodding along. But the truth is, every success I'd built over the past 5 years felt hollow. Because the one person who deserved to see it, the woman who'd bled for every dollar that went into my company's foundation, was gone. I need you to understand something. I built Harold Electric Solutions from absolutely nothing. Started at 24 with an $18,000 loan, a used truck, and a tool belt my mother bought me for my high school graduation. I worked 18-hour days for 3 years straight, lived in a one-bedroom apartment with furniture from the side of the road, ate ramen 4 nights a week so I could reinvest every dollar back into the company. Now I'm 39 years old. I've got 60 employees, a house in Ridgemont with actual property, a daughter who goes to private school, and a Mercedes in the parking lot that I bought with cash. On paper, I'm living the dream my mother and I used to talk about when I was a kid fixing broken radios at our kitchen table. But here's the thing about success nobody tells you. It doesn't fill the holes. It just makes them easier to ignore. Dennis was talking about subcontractor bids, scrolling through numbers on his tablet while his eggs got cold. The diner was packed with the usual morning crowd, contractors in work boots, business types checking emails over coffee. The smell of bacon grease and toast, the TV above the bar playing local news on low volume with captions running across the bottom. I was only half listening to Dennis because I was checking my phone for supplier estimates when I heard the news anchor mention something about the homeless crisis downtown. I glanced up at the screen, and my entire world stopped. They were showing footage of paramedics loading someone onto a gurney outside a shelter. The camera was far away, the image grainy, but I knew that face. Even thinner than I remembered. Even with gray hair instead of the brown she used to keep dyed. Even with skin that looked like paper and bones that seemed too sharp under her clothes. I knew her. The caption scrolled, Tiffany Harold, 73, found unconscious outside downtown shelter. Critical condition. St. Augustine Medical Center. My mother. My mother who disappeared 5 years ago on a Tuesday morning in March. Who left a note on her nightstand saying she didn't want to be a burden anymore. Who we searched for, God, we searched for months. With private investigators and police reports and flyers and a $50,000 reward that nobody ever claimed. My mother, who I'd accepted, was probably dead somewhere. Because what else do you do after 5 years of silence? My coffee cup hit the table. My hands were shaking. Carl? Dennis looked up, concerned. You okay? I couldn't answer. My throat felt like someone had wrapped a fist around it. Alive. She was alive. 6 hours away in a hospital fighting for her life, while I'd been closing deals and attending parent-teacher conferences and pretending the hole in my chest was something I'd eventually learn to live with. I have to go. I stood up fast enough that the booth seat scraped loud against the floor. Dennis blinked. "What?" "Carl, we've got the Miller meeting at 10. Cancel it. Handle it yourself. I don't care." I grabbed my jacket, my keys, my phone. My brain was already running. Hospital was 6 hours south. I could be there by 3 if I left now. I needed to call ahead. I needed to... "Carl, what's going on?" Dennis called after me, but I was already pushing through the diner door into the parking lot. I got into my car and sat there with the engine running, staring at my phone. Pulled up the news story. Read it 3 times. St. Jacques, Augustine Medical Center. Critical condition. Found outside a homeless shelter with no identification, using a fake name. Questions crashed through my head one after another. Where had she been for 5 years? How did she end up on the streets? Why didn't she come home? Why didn't she call? Did she think we stopped looking? Did she forget who she was? I put the car in gear and pulled onto the highway heading south. 6 hours to get answers. 6 hours to understand how the woman who raised me could vanish into thin air and end up dying alone on a sidewalk 70 miles from home. I pressed harder on the gas and tried not to think about what I was going to find when I got there. The highway stretched ahead of me, 6 hours of asphalt and white lines, but my mind wasn't in the present. It was 30 years back, in a small rental house on the edge of town where the walls were thin and my father's truck engine was the only warning system we had. People ask me all the time how I built Herald Electric from nothing. They want the business strategy, the networking secrets, the lucky break that made it all click. But the truth is simpler and uglier than that. My mother bled for every dollar that went into the foundation. I was 8 years old the first time I understood what my father really was. He came home late on a Friday, smelling like whiskey and cigarette smoke, and I heard something crash in the kitchen. My mother's voice stayed calm. She always stayed calm. But I could hear the fear underneath it. "Just go to bed, sweetheart," she'd told me earlier when I asked why Dad was angry again. "Everything's going to be fine." It wasn't fine. It was never fine when he came home like that. But she stood between us every single time. Took the yelling, took the thrown dishes, took the bruises she'd cover with long sleeves the next morning before her shift at Valley View Nursing Home. She worked doubles most weeks, 16-hour days wiping down patients and changing bedpans and coming home with disinfectant smell soaked into her scrubs. And still, she'd sit with me at the kitchen table afterward, helping with homework. She barely understood herself because she'd dropped out of high school to work. "One more year, Carl," she'd whisper when I asked if things would get better. "Just one more year and we'll figure it out." I was 14 when the truck accident happened. They found my father's vehicle flipped in a ditch off Highway 9. An empty bottle on the passenger seat, and nothing left to identify him but his wallet and a half-burned cigarette. The police called it a single-vehicle accident. Nobody at the funeral said what everyone was thinking, that it was only a matter of time, that it was a miracle he hadn't taken someone else with him. My mother and I stood beside that casket in cheap black clothes that didn't fit right, and when the service ended, she squeezed my hand hard enough to hurt. "It's just you and me now," she said. "We're going to be okay." I believed her because I had to. After he was gone, the house was quiet in a way that felt like peace. No more boots on the porch. No more slammed doors. No more holding my breath, waiting to see which version of him walked through the door. Mom picked up extra shifts. I picked up anything I could. Bagging groceries after school, mowing lawns in summer, shoveling driveways in winter. And somewhere along the way, I discovered I had a gift for fixing things. Radios, toasters, broken lamps people threw away. I'd take them apart, figure out what was wrong, put them back together. Mom used to watch me work at that same kitchen table, components spread out on newspaper, and she'd smile like I was performing surgery. "You're going to build us a better life with those hands, baby." She was right. I graduated high school, then community college on a partial scholarship while working full-time as a maintenance tech. At 24, I had my electrician's license, 3 years of solid experience, and an idea. My mother had saved $18,000 over 20 years, every spare dollar she could hide from my father, then every spare dollar after he was gone. She handed me that bank book and said, "Take it. Build something." I took it. Started Herald Electric Solutions with a used truck, basic tools, and that $18,000. Worked 18-hour days, 7 days a week for 3 years. Ate ramen and rice, slept 4 hours a night. Reinvested every single dollar back into the business. 5 years later, we were pulling in $8 million a year. I had 60 employees, major commercial contracts, a reputation for quality work that opened doors across 3 counties. The first thing I did when the money started coming in was buy my mother a house. Nothing huge, but clean and safe with a yard and a porch and walls that didn't remember violence. I handed her the keys on her 60th birthday. She ran her hand along the smooth wall and smiled like it was marble. "You did it, Carl," she'd whispered, standing in that empty living room that smelled like fresh paint. "You built the life we talked about." I had, but none of it meant anything without her there to see it. Now I was driving 70 miles an hour toward a hospital where she was dying, and all I could think was, how did it all fall apart? Before we go any further, if you love stories like this, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Drop your city in the comments. I like knowing where you're tuning in from. All right, let's keep going. The day my mother left the house, it was my wife Rachel that noticed she was gone and called me. I met Rachel at a Chamber of Commerce mixer 1 year after I bought my mother that house. The event was at the Riverside Hotel, one of those networking things where local business owners pretend to care about economic development, while really just hunting for contracts and connections. I almost didn't go. I'd spent the day on a job site dealing with a supplier screw-up, and I was tired and covered in drywall dust I hadn't completely washed off. But Dennis convinced me. "You need to show your face, man. Herald Electric's getting big enough that people expect to see you at these things." So I went. I put on a suit, showed up an hour late, grabbed a drink from the bar, and tried to look interested, while a real estate developer talked to me about market trends. That's when I saw her. Rachel was standing near the windows talking to a group of suits, holding a glass of wine like it was part of her hand. She was beautiful in that polished, intentional way. Dark hair pulled back, jewelry that looked expensive but not flashy, a dress that probably cost more than my first truck. But what caught my attention wasn't how she looked. It was how she carried herself. Confidence, in control. Like she knew exactly what she wanted and exactly how to get it. She looked over mid-conversation, caught me staring, and smiled. 10 minutes later, she was standing next to me at the bar. "Carl Herald," she said, not asking. "Herald Electric Solutions. I've heard good things." I was surprised she knew my name. Should I be flattered or concerned? "Flattered. I do my research," she said while extending her hand. "My name is Rachel Pierce. I'm in marketing at Cordell Industrial. We handle branding and client development for mid-size contractors." Her handshake was firm, professional. She asked smart questions about my business, expansion plans, client retention strategies, challenges with scaling. Not the surface-level small talk most people made at these events. Real questions that showed she understood how the industry worked. We talked for an hour, then two. By the time the event ended, I had her number and a dinner plan for Friday. The 6 months that followed were the kind of whirlwind you see in movies. Expensive restaurants where she knew the staff by name, weekend trips to the coast, late-night conversations about building something bigger than ourselves. She fit into my life so smoothly, it felt like she'd always been there. Rachel talked about her ambitions constantly, how she wanted to build her own firm someday, how she was tired of working for someone else, how she wanted a partner who understood what it took to create something from nothing. "You get it, Carl," she'd say, her hand on my arm across the table. "Most men are intimidated by a woman with goals. But you built an empire from $18,000 and a dream. That's the kind of man I want to build with." I proposed after 10 months. The wedding was bigger than I wanted, but exactly what Rachel envisioned. 200 guests, live band, flowers everywhere. A photographer who cost more than my first year of business revenue. My mother sat in the front row wearing a pale blue dress she'd bought and altered herself, crying through the entire ceremony. Afterward, she hugged Rachel so tight I thought she might crack a rib. "Take care of each other," Mom said, her voice thick with emotion. "That's all that matters in this life. Just take care of each other." Rachel smiled and promised we would. By then, Herald Electric was pulling in about $11 million a year. I could afford the kind of life I'd only dreamed about as a kid. We bought a house in Ridgemont. 4 bedrooms, a big yard, quiet street with good schools. Painted the walls ourselves on weekends. Argued over curtain colors. Planted a small maple tree out front that we joked would outlive us both. Harper, our child, was born 18 months later. My mother was the third person to hold her, right after Rachel and me, and when Harper's first word turned out to be Nana instead of Mama or Dada, we all laughed so hard we cried. For a while, maybe 2 years, life felt like we'd finally made it. 3 generations. Sunday dinners with my mother bringing casseroles and secondhand children's books from donation bins at the nursing home. Rachel posting family photos online with captions about gratitude and blessings. On the surface, everything was perfect. But looking back now, driving toward that hospital with my hands tight on the wheel, I can see the cracks I ignored. The way Rachel smiled less when my mother stayed too long. The comments about needing our own space as a family. The subtle pressure to let Mom stay at her own house instead of ours. I just didn't want to see it then. I should have. My mother started forgetting small things when Harper was 2 years old. At first, it was easy to dismiss. She'd forget where she parked at the grocery store. Call me twice in one day to ask the same question. Show up at our house on Saturday when we'd agreed on Sunday. Normal aging stuff, I told myself. She was 70. People forget things. But then it got worse. I stopped by her house one afternoon and found her staring at her kitchen stove like she'd never seen it before. "How do I turn this on?" she asked, her voice small and confused. This was the same stove she'd used for 4 years, the same woman who'd cooked thousands of meals in her life. The fear in her eyes told me she knew something was wrong. The doctor's appointment confirmed what I'd been avoiding. Early-stage Alzheimer's disease. Progressive. No cure. She'd need supervision within a year, maybe sooner. The doctor said, she shouldn't be living alone. The progression can be unpredictable. Wandering, confusion, safety becomes a real concern. I didn't even hesitate before I said, She's moving in with us. Rachel was sitting beside me in that office. She reached over and squeezed my hand. Of course, she said, her voice soft and supportive. We'll make it work. Family takes care of each other. We converted the guest room into Mom's space. Painted it yellow because that was her favorite color. Moved in her rocking chair, her photo albums, the quilt she'd made when I was born. I wanted her to feel like it was hers, not like she was intruding. The first night she slept there, she cried and apologized for being a burden. I sat on the edge of her bed and held her hand. You spent my entire childhood protecting me from Dad, I said. You worked yourself half to death to give me a future. This isn't a burden, Mom. This is me finally getting to pay you back. She squeezed my hand. You're a good son, Carl. For the first few weeks, Rachel played the role perfectly. She called my mother Tiff with affection, made her tea in the afternoons, posted photos on social media with captions about 3 generations under one roof and blessed beyond measure. But the cracks started showing fast. By the time Harper turned 3, Mom needed full-time supervision. She was barely recognizing us some days. She'd wake up at 2 in the morning thinking it was time to make breakfast. Forget she'd already eaten lunch and ask for it again an hour later. Call me by my father's name and then panic when she realizes her mistake. Rachel's patience wore thin. The bedroom door started closing harder at night. The smiles became forced. I'd catch her on her phone texting furiously, and when I asked who, she'd snap that it was work. I have a career too, Carl. Not all of us can just focus on family drama all day. One night after Harper was asleep, Rachel cornered me in the kitchen. This house feels like a hospital, she said, her voice low but angry. I didn't sign up for this. We have a 3-year-old daughter who needs attention, and instead we're dealing with medications and adult diapers and 3 a.m. wake-up calls. She's my mother, Rachel. And I'm your wife. She stepped closer, her eyes hard. When does that start mattering again? If you want more stories like this, where family masks crack, real loyalty gets tested, and people show who they really are when it stops being convenient, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. I started staying late at work, not because the jobs required it, but because going home meant walking into tension so thick you could feel it in the air. Harper started getting quieter, tiptoeing around the house like she was afraid of setting something off, and Mom, even through the confusion, seemed to sense she wasn't wanted. Maybe I should go back to my house, she said one evening while we sat together in her room. You can't live alone anymore, Mom. You know that. I know I'm causing problems between you and Rachel. Her eyes were clearer than they'd been in days. I hear her, baby, when she thinks I'm sleeping. My stomach dropped. Hear her say what? Mom just shook her head and looked away. That same week, I started noticing irregularities in our business accounts. Small transfers I didn't recognize. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. Rachel had access to the secondary accounts. I'd added her to the accounts 6 months after we married because I thought that's what husbands did. Trust their wives. I told myself there had to be an explanation. But late at night, when the house was quiet and Rachel was asleep beside me, I'd lie awake wondering when exactly everything had started falling apart, and whether I'd been too blind to see it coming. The morning my mother disappeared started like any other Tuesday in March. My alarm went off at 5:30. I had an investor meeting scheduled for 7 downtown, a group out of Charlotte interested in backing our expansion into commercial solar installation. Herald Electric was pulling in about $12 million a year by then, and this solar deal could add another $3 to $4 million annually. Big money. The kind of opportunity that could set us up for the next decade. Rachel was already awake when I got out of the shower, which was unusual. She normally slept until Harper's alarm went off at 7. But that morning, she was in the kitchen making coffee, dressed in her robe, smiling at me like she hadn't spent the last 6 months barely speaking to me. "Big day," she said, handing me a travel mug. "You're going to kill it." I kissed her cheek, grateful for the moment of normalcy. "Thanks. I'll probably be gone most of the day. These investor types like to talk. Take your time. We'll be fine here." I grabbed my briefcase and headed for the door, then stopped. My mother's bedroom door was cracked open. I could see the edge of her bed, neatly made. Her slippers weren't by the nightstand where she usually kept them. "Mom's up early," I said. Rachel didn't look up from her coffee. "Bathroom, probably. You know how she is in the mornings." I almost went to check. Something in my gut told me to, but I was already running late and the Charlotte investors weren't the type to wait around. I told myself she was fine. Rachel was there. What could go wrong? I left at 5:50. The meeting ran long. 8 hours of presentations, questions, negotiations, lunch that turned into dinner. By the time I walked out with a signed term sheet worth $3 million, it was almost 6 in the evening, and my phone was dead. I plugged it into the car charger and watched 17 missed calls from Rachel pop up on the screen. I called her back. She answered on the first ring, her voice high and panicked. "Where have you been? Carl, you need to come home right now. The police are here." "What? Why? Is Harper okay?" "Harper's fine. It's your mother. She's gone." The world tilted. "Gone where?" "I don't know. I went to her room after you left and she wasn't in her room. Her coat's missing. Her shoes. I looked everywhere. I don't remember the drive home. I just remember my hands shaking on the wheel and Rachel's voice replaying in my head. When I got there, 2 patrol cars were parked in front of my house. Neighbors stood on their porches watching. Rachel met me at the door. Mascara streaked down her face, pulling me inside. A police officer sat at our kitchen table. "Mr. Harold, we're treating this as a missing person case, but given your mother's condition, we need to be realistic about what we're dealing with." "What does that mean?" He handed me a plastic evidence bag. Inside was a piece of paper with my name written at the top in my mother's shaky handwriting. The note was short. 3 sentences that felt like a knife. "Carl, I love you more than anything in this world, but I can't keep causing problems in your marriage. I'm tired of being a burden. I need to go before I forget how much I love you." "No." I shook my head. No, she wouldn't. She knows she's not a burden. I told her that. Rachel put her hand on my shoulder. "She's been so confused lately, honey. Maybe she didn't understand. Maybe she thought she wouldn't leave. Not like this." But the officer's expression told me he'd seen this before. Elderly patients with dementia wandering off. Most of them didn't make it far. Most of them were found within 48 hours. Most of them. Not all. We searched for months. I hired 3 different private investigators, put up flyers from here to the state line, offered a $50,000 reward for information. The police checked shelters, hospitals, morgues. Nothing. Rachel played the supportive wife for the cameras, posted appeals on social media, held my hand at press conferences, told everyone how much she missed Tiff and how hard this was on our family. But late at night, when she thought I was asleep, I'd hear her on the phone in the bathroom, whispering. Once I heard her say, "It's handled. She's not coming back." When I asked her about it the next morning, she said it was her sister talking about a work problem. I wanted to believe her, 5 years passed. The case went cold. The police stopped calling. People stopped asking. And I learned to live with the hole in my chest where my mother used to be. I pulled back into the present, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. 5 years of grief, 5 years of questions with no answers. And now I was 2 hours into a 6-hour drive with my mother dying in a hospital bed 70 miles away. I'd called the hospital from a rest stop an hour back. "This is Carl Harold," I told the nurse who answered. "Tiffany Harold is my mother. I saw the news report. I'm driving down from Ridgemont." There was a pause. Then, "Mr. Harold, I'm so glad you called. Your mother is in critical care. You should get here as soon as you can." The way she said it, that careful, trained sympathy, told me everything I needed to know. My mother wasn't in a good condition. What happened to her? Where has she been? "The doctor will explain everything when you arrive, Mr. Harold. Just please drive safely." I called Rachel next. She answered on the third ring, annoyed. "Carl, I'm in the middle of Harper's piano lesson. Can this wait?" "They found her." Silence. Then, "Found who?" "My mother. She's alive, Rachel. She's in a hospital in St. Augustine." Another pause, longer this time. When Rachel spoke again, her voice had shifted into something softer, more controlled. "Oh my God. Carl, that's incredible. Is she okay?" "I don't know yet. I'm driving there now. Do you want me to come?" "I can get someone to watch Harper." "No." The word came out harder than I meant it. "Stay with Harper. I'll call you when I know more." I hung up before she could respond. The truth was, I didn't want her there. I couldn't explain why. Not even to myself. Maybe it was the way she'd paused before responding. Maybe it was 5 years of watching her move on from my mother's disappearance faster than I ever could. Maybe it was those late-night phone calls I'd overheard and tried to forget. Or maybe it was the simple fact that somewhere deep in my gut, I'd never fully believed my mother would leave us by choice. The miles disappeared beneath my tires. I passed exit signs for towns I'd never heard of. My mind kept cycling through the same questions on repeat. Where had she been for 5 years? How did she survive? Why didn't she come home? Did she even remember who she was? The news report said she'd been found outside a shelter. That meant she'd been living on the streets. My mother, who worked double shifts her entire life, who kept our apartment spotless even when she was exhausted, who never asked for help from anyone, had been homeless. How does that happen? The logical answer was the Alzheimer's. She got confused, wandered too far, couldn't find her way back. It made sense. But something about it felt wrong. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. A text from Dennis. "Investors signed. We're moving forward with solar expansion. Where'd you disappear to?" I didn't respond. The $15 million contract I'd been celebrating 6 hours ago felt like it belonged to a different person's life. Another text, this time from Rachel. "I'm here if you need me. Love you." I stared at those 2 words. Love you. She said them all the time. Casually, automatically, the way people say bless you after a sneeze. When had they stopped meaning anything? The exit sign for St. Augustine appeared ahead. I took the ramp, followed the GPS directions through streets I didn't know. In 20 minutes, I was going to walk into that hospital and see what 5 years on the streets had done to the woman who'd sacrificed everything to give me a future. And then I was going to find out exactly what happened the morning she disappeared. St. Augustine Medical Center was a 6-story brick building that smelled like disinfectant. I parked in the visitor lot, and sat in my car for 30 seconds, trying to prepare myself for what I was about to see. But there's no preparing for something like this. You just walk through the door and deal with whatever's waiting on the other side. The woman at the front desk checked my ID and made a phone call. 2 minutes later, a nurse appeared. Middle-aged, kind eyes, the sort of person who'd probably seen too much suffering to be surprised by anything anymore. "Mr. Harold? I'm Karen. I've been caring for your mother since she was admitted." She gestured down a hallway. "Come with me. Dr. Reyes wants to speak with you before you see her." "How bad is it?" She didn't answer. She just signaled to the direction we are going. Dr. Reyes met us in a small consultation room. He was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with tired eyes and a tablet he kept glancing at like he was reading bad news he didn't want to deliver. "Mr. Harold, thank you for coming so quickly. I need to be direct with you because time is a factor here." He pulled up a chart on his tablet. "Your mother has stage 4 brain cancer. It's advanced, aggressive, and untreatable at this point. She also has severe malnutrition, pneumonia, and damage consistent with long-term exposure to the elements." The words hit me like physical blows. "Cancer? How long has she had it?" "Based on the scans, at least 2 years, possibly longer. Combined with her Alzheimer's diagnosis, it explains the rapid cognitive decline." He set the tablet down. "I'm very sorry, Mr. Harold, but your mother has days left. A week at most. We're keeping her comfortable, but there's nothing more we can do medically." I couldn't speak. Couldn't process it. "Where?" My voice cracked. I tried again. "Where has she been? How did she end up here?" The social worker sitting beside Dr. Reyes spoke up. "Your mother was found unconscious outside the downtown shelter 3 days ago. Based on what the shelter staff told us, she'd been in and out of their facility for approximately 6 months, maybe longer. Before that, we don't know. She had no identification on her when she was found. We only discovered her identity yesterday when we located an old medical alert bracelet buried in her belongings." 6 months. I stared at her. "What about before that?" "She's been missing for 5 years." The social worker shook her head. "We don't have that information, Mr. Harold. She was using a different name at the shelter. Mary Johnson. The staff said she rarely spoke, kept to herself, and seemed very confused most of the time. 5 years of my mother's life. Gone. Erased. Living on streets in cities I'd never know. Probably not even remembering her own name half the time." "Can I see her?" Dr. Reyes nodded. "She's sedated right now, but you can sit with her. There's a chance she might have periods of clarity. Sometimes patients do, near the end." They led me down another hallway to the ICU. The room was small and dim, machines beeping softly beside the bed. And there, under white sheets that made her look even smaller than she was, lay my mother. I barely recognized her. She'd always been thin, but this was something else. Her skin looked like paper stretched over bone. Her hair, which she'd always kept neat even when money was tight, lay limp and gray against the pillow. An oxygen tube ran under her nose. IV lines snaked from both arms. This wasn't the woman who'd stood between me and my father's rage. This wasn't the woman who'd worked herself half to death to give me a future. This was what 5 years of abandonment and suffering looked like. I pulled a chair close to the bed and took her hand. It felt like holding bird bones wrapped in tissue paper. "Mom," I whispered. "It's Carl. I'm here now. I'm so sorry I didn't find you sooner." She didn't respond. The machines kept beeping their steady rhythm. I sat there holding her hand, and tried to figure out how I was going to live with the guilt of not searching harder. I stayed at that hospital for 3 days straight. The nurses brought me coffee I didn't drink and sandwiches I barely touched. I slept in the chair beside my mother's bed, my hand wrapped around hers, waiting for something, anything, that would give me answers. Rachel called 6 times the first day. I answered once. "Carl, you need to come home. Harper's asking for you. You can't just abandon your family." The word abandon hit different after sitting beside my mother's dying body for 12 hours. "I'll come home when I'm ready," I said, and hung up. Dennis handled the business. My assistant rescheduled meetings. The world kept turning while mine fell apart in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and death. On the 3rd day, something changed. I was half asleep in the chair when I heard my mother's voice, weak but clearer than it had been since I'd arrived. "Carl?" My eyes snapped open. She was looking at me, actually looking at me. Her eyes focused in a way they hadn't been before. If you're invested in this story, hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. "Mom." I moved closer, gripping her hand. "I'm right here. Where am I?" Her voice was thin as paper. "Hospital, St. Augustine. They found you outside a shelter 3 days ago." Confusion flickered across her face. Then something else. Fear. "How long have I been gone?" 5 years, Mom." Tears spilled down her cheeks. 5 years? No, that can't be right. "What do you remember? What happened the morning you left?" She closed her eyes, struggling. "Rachel. She came into my room early. You were already getting ready for work. She said..." Her breath caught. "She said you couldn't take it anymore, that I was destroying your marriage, that you'd asked her to take me somewhere I could get proper care." My blood went cold. "She said I wanted you gone?" "She had papers, said you'd signed them. I didn't understand all the words, but she kept saying you were ashamed of me. That Harper was embarrassed to have a grandmother who couldn't remember her name." Fresh tears came. "She drove me somewhere far away, gave me some money, and told me if I came back, if I tried to contact you, she'd make sure I never saw Harper again." "Mom, none of that was true. I never wanted you gone. I never signed anything." "I know that now," she whispered. "But I was so confused back then. Some days I couldn't remember your name. I thought maybe she was right. Maybe I was too much of a burden." I pulled out my phone with shaking hands. "Mom, I need you to tell me that again. Everything you just said. Can you do that?" She nodded weakly. I hit record. For the next 10 minutes, my mother told me everything she could remember. How Rachel had manipulated her. How she'd been dropped off in a city she didn't recognize with $300 and instructions never to return. She had me write a note, told me what to say. I was so confused I just did what she asked. How she'd lived in shelters and on streets. Her mind getting worse, until she couldn't remember why she left in the first place. When she finished, she looked at me with eyes that were already starting to cloud again. "I'm sorry, baby. I should have been stronger." "You have nothing to be sorry for." I kissed her forehead. "Nothing. You rest now, okay? I'm going to fix this." She smiled weakly and closed her eyes. 2 hours later, she slipped into unconsciousness. She never woke up again. 4 hours after that, with me holding her hand and whispering that I loved her, the machines flatlined and my mother was gone. I sat there in that silence for a long time. Then I made 3 phone calls. The first was to my lawyer. "Tom, I need you to file emergency divorce papers, and I need you to contact the district attorney about elder abuse charges. I'm sending you evidence. The second was to the private investigator I'd used 5 years ago, the one who'd come closest to finding leads. I need you to pull every financial record, phone record, and piece of documentation on my wife from 5 years ago to present. Everything. Cost doesn't matter. The third was to my forensic accountant. Start auditing every account Rachel has access to. I want to know every dollar she's moved, when, and where it went. Rachel thought she'd gotten away with it. She was about to learn what it cost to destroy the wrong man's family. My mother's funeral was small. I kept it that way on purpose. A few old co-workers from the nursing home, some neighbors who remembered her. Dennis and his wife. Harper, who cried into my shoulder without fully understanding why Nana had been gone so long in the first place. Rachel showed up 20 minutes late, wearing black that looked more like a cocktail dress than funeral attire. She tried to hug me in front of everyone. I stepped back. "Not here," I said quietly. After the service, while people were offering condolences, my lawyer appeared at my elbow. "Rachel's been served. Divorce papers and a criminal complaint for elder abuse, fraud, and coercion. Police are investigating based on the evidence you provided." Rachel's face went white when she saw Tom standing beside me. She pulled me aside near the parking lot, her voice low and furious. "What the hell is this? Carl, you're divorcing me? Your mother just died and you're starting a war? My mother died because you put her on the streets and told her I didn't want her anymore." I kept my voice level, emotionless. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out? I don't know what she told you, but she was confused, Carl. You know how bad her Alzheimer's was. I have a recording. She was clear. She told me everything." The color drained from Rachel's face completely. "You're going to lose everything," I continued. "The house, the money you stole from my business accounts, your reputation, your career. And you're going to lose Harper. I'm getting full custody, and you'll be lucky if a judge lets you see her supervised. You can't do this." Her voice shook. "I'm her mother. You're a criminal, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it." The legal battle moved faster than Rachel expected. I had resources she'd underestimated. Lawyers who cost more per hour than most people made in a week. Investigators who found things people thought were buried forever. Within a few weeks, my team had reconstructed everything. The $47,000 in cash withdrawals from our business accounts the week before Mom disappeared. Text messages Rachel thought she'd deleted, recovered from cloud backups, showing coordination with someone named Jay about taking care of the problem. The number belonged to a cash-for-hire driver service Rachel had used. Phone records proving she'd driven 6 hours south the morning my mother vanished. The forensic accountant found another $340,000 Rachel had siphoned into hidden accounts over 18 months. Money she'd planned to take in the divorce she'd probably been planning long before my mother disappeared. Rachel hired an aggressive lawyer who tried to paint me as a controlling husband using wealth to bully his wife. But evidence doesn't care about narratives. The custody and criminal hearings happened within a month. The courtroom was packed. Local reporters had picked up the story, and it spread fast. I sat at the plaintiff's table watching Rachel's lawyer try to punch holes in an airtight case. Then my lawyer played the recording. My mother's voice filled the courtroom, weak but clear, describing how Rachel had manipulated her, lied to her, abandoned her hours from home with instructions never to return. I watched Rachel's face crumble as she heard it. watched the jury's expressions shift from neutral to disgusted. When Rachel took the stand, her lawyer tried to control the damage. She claimed she'd panicked because my mother's illness was too much to handle, that she'd made a terrible mistake, but never intended harm. My lawyer's cross-examination destroyed her in 10 minutes. "Mrs. Harold, did you tell Tiffany Harold that her son was ashamed of her?" I may have said, "Yes or no?" The lawyer asked swiftly, "Yes, but did you steal $387,000 from your husband's business accounts?" She was silence. "Your Honor, I have documentation right here." "Yes." Rachel's voice was barely a whisper. The judge's ruling came down 3 days later. I got full custody of Harper. Rachel got supervised visitation, contingent on completing court-ordered therapy. The criminal charges resulted in a guilty plea to reduced offenses, 5 years probation, full restitution of the stolen money, 300 hours of community service, and a permanent record. Rachel lost the house in the divorce settlement, lost her job when her employer saw the headlines, lost every connection she'd built through my business network. I watched her leave the courthouse alone, and I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. 3 years passed faster than I expected. Harold Electric Solutions expanded into solar energy and now operates across 5 states. We hit $22 million in annual revenue last year. I hired a CEO to run daily operations so I could focus on what actually matters, being present for Harper. She's 13 now. Smart, kind, with my mother's smile. We go to therapy together every other week, working through the complicated feelings of losing a grandmother she barely got to know and learning that her mother had caused it all. It's not easy, but we're managing. I started the Tiffany Harold Foundation the year after Mom died. It funds Alzheimer's research, supports homeless shelters, and helps families navigate elder care. Every contract I sign, 10% goes into that foundation. It's not just charity, it's making sure my mother's suffering meant something beyond our family. Last month, I was at a fundraiser the foundation sponsored at the downtown community center. We were launching a new program providing legal assistance to families dealing with elder abuse cases. About 200 people showed up, donors, volunteers, families we'd helped. I was talking with the program director when I saw someone familiar serving drinks at the refreshment table. Rachel. She'd aged in ways that had nothing to do with the 3 years that had passed. Her hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. No makeup. She wore the plain polo shirt and khakis of the catering company's staff. The woman who used to spend $300 on a single outfit was now working hourly jobs to make rent. Our eyes met across the room. She looked away immediately. Later, I talked with the event coordinator. "That woman serving drinks," I said casually. "How'd she end up working for your company?" "Oh, Rachel. She came through our Second Chance employment program. We help people with criminal records get back on their feet." The coordinator checked her tablet. "She's actually been one of our most reliable workers. Shows up on time, works hard, doesn't complain. Trying to rebuild, I guess." After the event ended and most people had left, Rachel was collecting empty glasses near the stage. I approached her. She froze when she saw me coming, like she was expecting me to yell or make a scene. Instead, I just stood there for a moment, looking at what had become of the woman who'd destroyed my mother. "Carl." Her voice was quiet, defeated. "I know you don't want to hear this, but I'm sorry. I know sorry doesn't fix anything, but—" "You're right," I interrupted. "It doesn't." I walked away and didn't look back. That weekend, Harper and I drove to the cemetery where my mother is buried. The headstone is simple but beautiful. Her name, the dates that bookend a life of sacrifice, and the words I chose. She gave everything so others could have more. Harper placed fresh flowers on the grave while I stood with my hand on the stone. "You know what Nana taught me, Mom?" I said out loud, the way I always do when we visit. "She taught me that real strength isn't about how much money you make or how successful you become. It's about who you protect when they can't protect themselves. It's about using whatever power you have to make sure people face consequences for hurting the innocent." Harper slipped her hand into mine. "Do you think Nana knows we're here?" "I think she knows we remember her. And I think that matters more than anything." We stood there together in the afternoon sun, and I made the same promise I make every time we visit. If you want more stories like this, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Drop your city below and let me know if you're ready for more endings like this.